Hey, welcome back everyone. In this series of videos, I want to talk to you about a topic that is dreaded by lots of us when we study it, especially for the first time, especially when we are new to this field of grammar. And this topic is verbals. So, I'm going to talk to you about what verbals are, the different verbals that exist in English, of course, and how we can identify these verbals and assign the functions that they are performing. So, before I tell you all of this, however, I need to tell you what a verbal is. See, to discuss a verbal, I want to bring to your attention a concept that we study in grammar, which is finite verbs and infinite verbs. Now, not infinitive verbs. I didn't say that. I said infinite verbs. So, a finite verb is what we actually understand right now in this topic as a verb. That is to say, a verb that is conjugated, a verb that shows an action that is happening, that happened, that should happen, that must have happened, but that shows conjugation. That's a finite verb. An infinite verb is a verbal. Okay, an infinite verb is a verbal in that it shows potential action. There is the possibility of action there, but it is not conjugated. Okay, so consider this. Do you remember Tarzan? You must remember Tarzan in Spanish. When we saw these movies or series where Tarzan appears, he spoke like Tarzan querer a Jane, Tarzan querer a Jane. So see, this querer, that is an infinite verb. It's not conjugated. That is a verbal because it doesn't show that an action is happening, has happened, should happen, will happen, etc. So, right now, this is what I mean when I say that a verbal is a word that looks like a verb, but it isn't one. I am not going to consider a verbal a verb because it is not conjugated. That's what you need to remember. This is a very important element that you need to bear in mind in order to understand verbals better. So, if a verbal is not a verb, then what is it? Well, a verbal is a word that performs the roles of other parts of speech. Okay? So, in other words, a verbal is not going to be a verb. A verbal is going to be a noun, or a verbal is going to be an adjective or an adverb. If it is not performing the role of another part of a speech, then the verbal is a part. A verbal is a part of a verb form. This is important. I need you to remember, I'm saying that it's a part of a verb form. I'm not saying that the verbal is the verb. I'm not saying that the verbal is the verb form. No, it's part of it. So, which are the verbals then? So we now know that a verbal is a word that looks like a verb, but it isn't one because it's not conjugated, and it's going to perform the role of other parts of a speech, or it's going to be part of a verb form. Now, the verbals are class, infinitives, gerunds, present participles, and past participles. Those are the four kinds of verbals. Now, other people who study verbals, they classify only three different classes of verbals. They say infinitives, gerunds, and participles, taking into consideration both present and past participles. For aspects of clarity, I have decided not to include the participles, both present and past, as one kind of verbal, but as two different kinds of verbals. So we have infinitives, which we already know, of course. It's the verb, the particle to, and the verb without adding any s, without adding any ing, etc. Then we have gerunds, which are verbs in the ing form. And then we have present participles, which are the verbs in the ing form. Hey, wait, teacher, you just said that gerunds are verbs in the ing form, and now you tell me that present participles are also verbs in the ing form. Yes, that is exactly what I just said. And we have gerunds and present participles both ending in ing, but they are not the same thing, okay? Because they perform different roles. But hold your horses, in due time I am going to be explaining the differences between gerunds and verbals. Between gerunds and present participles. And then we have past participles. Now, those are the 4 different kinds of verbals. Those are the ones that we are going to be discussing in this lesson. So, let's start talking about infinitives. Now guys, I want you to pay attention that infinitives are the most polyphacetic verbals, because infinitives can be nouns, they can be adjectives, and they can be adverbs. Okay? An infinitive can be a noun, it can be an adjective, and it can be an adverb. Because of this multiplicity of functions that an infinitive may have, not functions, the multiplicity of parts of a speech that the infinitive must assume, that's what I meant to say, may assume, then we can say that the analysis of the infinitives are the most difficult one. The analysis of the infinitives is the most difficult one, because we have to decide if the infinitive is a noun, if it's an adjective, or if it's an adverb. If it's a noun, I am going to ask you to tell me what role the infinitive as a noun is performing. Actually, this is going to help you to figure out that an infinitive is a noun, because you can assign the role of a noun. For example, you can say that the infinitive is acting as a subject. That is definitely a clue that tells you that if it's acting as a subject and the subject is the function of a noun, then by logic, the infinitive, if you find the function to be a subject, by force it has to be a noun. And then we have adjectives, as I told you. Of course, we know what adjectives do. Adjectives, what they do is to modify nouns or noun equivalents, right? So, to recap, the infinitive acting as a noun is going to be performing the role of a noun. So it's going to be a subject, it's going to be a direct object, it's going to be an object complement, etc. The infinitive as an adjective is going to be modifying a noun, and we are going to find the infinitive when acting as an adjective next to the noun. Immediately after the noun, we are usually going to find it there. Immediately after the noun that it is modifying. And then we have, by the way, I just want to clarify that even though we find the adverb, the infinitives acting as adjectives right next to the noun, it doesn't mean, and I want to be very clear on this, it doesn't mean that every time you see a noun and then you have an infinitive after the noun, it doesn't mean that by force it is an adjective. You need to make sure that this infinitive is actually complementing the idea of the noun. We'll get there in due time. Then we have infinitives acting as adverbs, and the infinitive acting as an adverb, of course, an adverb, remember, can modify a verb, it can modify an adjective, and it can also modify another adverb. And you are going to find in some cases that it is easy to figure out that an infinitive is acting as an adverb, but sometimes it's a little harder. Sometimes you can see the adverb purpose, and the adverb purpose can be moved around. I can move the adverb purpose at the beginning of the sentence. If that happens, if I can do that, if I can move it to the beginning, if I can move the infinitive or the infinitive phrase to the beginning of the sentence, then I can surely say that that is an adverb. Now, let's talk about infinitives as nouns. Now, an infinitive as a noun, remember, is going to be performing the role of a noun. So, check this out, please. Monica decided to sleep. Check this example. Monica decided to sleep. How do I know that this is a noun? Teacher, that cannot be a noun. I mean, I don't get it. Why do you say it's a noun? Well, because it's acting as the direct object. Okay? Monica decided what? She decided to sleep. That's what she decided. Yes, teacher, but that is not a thing. That is not an object. You have to decide something or someone, right? Yeah, I know those are the questions we ask to find direct objects. And that is, we are asking the question what, then we are getting an answer. Yes? Remember that you can decide also courses of action. Right? If you can decide the course of action, if you can decide to do something, of course you can use an infinitive there, right? Monica decided something. She decided to sleep. Yeah. So we say Monica decided what? She decided to sleep. So if it is answering the question what after the verb, right? Then by force it has to be a direct object. So that's an infinitive acting as a noun, functioning as a direct object. Check the next example. To feel her touch reminded Mario of a past life. To feel her touch reminded Mario of a past life. Now, that is an infinitive phrase that is acting as a noun again. How do I know that it's acting as a noun? Because it's performing the role of a subject. Okay? If it is performing the role of a subject, by force it has to be assuming the role of a noun. Teacher, but can it be a pronoun? Well, no, because remember that infinitives, they are going to adopt 3 different parts of a speech. That's nouns, adjectives, and adverbs. So if it is behaving as the subject, then by force this is a noun. So what reminded Mario of a past life? To feel her touch. That's what reminded him of a past life. So it is acting as the subject. The last example that I have for you guys of infinitives as nouns is the next one. Her decision to leave Venezuela was not easy to take. Now that's an infinitive phrase again, and it's acting as a noun, and it is functioning as an appositive. Okay? Why is it an appositive? Well, you know this, right? What is her decision? I am renaming the decision. It is right next to the word that it renames. Yes? It is right next to the word that it renames. Her decision, comma, to leave Venezuela, comma, was not easy to take. I ask you guys, what was her decision? To leave Venezuela. And what is to leave Venezuela? Her decision. So it is an infinitive phrase acting as a noun, functioning as an appositive. Now, you may already have a doubt, a question about these differences, because here I wrote infinitive acting as a noun, and here I have written infinitive phrase acting as a noun, and here we have also an infinitive phrase acting as a noun. Now, you may be having questions about phrases. I want to remind you that we already studied about phrases in previous lessons, but also I will be discussing phrases a little later in this series of videos on verbals. This is all for the first video, guys. I'll see you in the next one.